All right, and like I said, we will be recording this presentation. We'll be emailing you all out with a link to view that recording at a later date, most likely within the next 24 hours. We'll also be providing the slides that Diane is going over today. So if you want to review them, you'll be able to, but also, take the screenshots now if you need to, but know that the slides are coming. Please use the Q&A box in the Zoom console for any questions that you have. Now, Diane is going to use the chat for some interactive features or conversation starters during the presentation. So when she's prompting you with a question, put that in chat. If you have a specific question, not related to one that Diane is prompting you to respond to, use the Q&A box. And we'll look at all those Q&As or questions, and we'll review those at the end of the show here. Feel free to follow along here or tweet along. You can use the hashtag Bloomerang, or you can add us at Bloomerang Tech. And let's see here, where did my cursor go? We got, for those of you who may not be familiar with Bloomerang or myself, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Josh Meyer. I'm the VP of Demand Generation over at Bloomerang. For those of you who are our weekly webinar followers, welcome back. We are so thrilled that you are here to join us today. If you have any questions about Bloomerang or would like someone to follow up, you can use that URL on this slide, bloomerang.co/demo, and we'd be more than happy to schedule some time to talk a little bit more about Bloomerang. But enough about Bloomerang. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, Diane Leonard. She is a certified Scrum Master. She's also certified to teach Scrum, and she's a grant, Diane, help me on this, grant professional, certified grant
professional certified.
Yeah, she's the bomb at grants. And so we're going to talk a little bit about all of that. And she's helped raise over $90 million in grants for organizations. So her and her team have been doing some really, really amazing work. So we are super excited to have Diane with us. And with that, I am going to stop my share and allow Diane to hop in and load her slides and introduce herself. Welcome, Diane.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, for having me. Thanks to the whole Bloomerang team for making this conversation possible today. So I love talking about all things grants. Like, that was my first love. But my second love, equal love now, is all things Agile. And which is why when we talk about responding to change, how we prioritize, how we handle things feeling like they're all equal in terms of prioritization, this is one of my favorites. Just a little bit more about me, not the formal stuff up at the top, but rather what's really important is actually that last bullet. I love to run or bike or move literally every morning before I get into all the grant things. And I also love to drink 1 cup of coffee a day. People don't believe it. I'm like, no, I really did. I went down to 1 cup. I make jokes about coffee a lot, but just 1. So to me, thinking about moving my body every day and like getting the endorphins, since I can only have 1 cup of coffee, that's really important for me every day. And it's how I ensure that I'm like bringing my best self. I'm thinking about a sustainable pace across all the things I'm passionate about. And it's going to help, I think, with today's conversation. So what I'd love to hear from you in the chat box, what is 1, maybe 2 things? What are your non-negotiables? The things that help you feel present and ready to tackle whatever it is that is your focus, the wonderful thing that you're doing in the nonprofit sector. So if you are willing, it's totally optional, but if you'd like to share that with us in the chat box, I would appreciate it. And good news, I got a great run in before it rained today in the Thousand Islands. And technically I brewed 2 cups of coffee. I managed to spill the entire first cup. I mean, like, it was a good size cup. Didn't break the mug, but like it fell, and I watched it all over the kitchen floor. And I was like, how do I respond to this change? How do I do it? The answer was, first clean up the coffee that's on the floor before you hit brew on another one. I did question the priorities in the moment. I have to be honest. I almost hit brew, like walked across the puddle to hit brew on the second cup. Made some choices, right? So what we're going to talk about today, you're like, oh, Diane, really? Yeah. When I think about prioritizing how we respond to change, I'm going to be talking about, yes, our work as nonprofit professionals. But as we go along, I want you to think about it in your daily personal life too. It really helps for when things don't go as planned to have some of this in your mind as a way that you can react. All right. Also, what exercise? Also, I see for Lisa, walking for Daryl. Yeah, I have a treadmill desk. It's over there in the office. It's kind of awkward to be on the webinar. It's kind of loud. I need to get some more time in. Let's see, what else do we have? The coffee thing. Okay, Zoe's also 1 cup. Good. High five. Thank you. I feel solidarity in that one. I miss having more. Great. So everyone's got lots of great ways that they're focusing on their self-care, which is incredibly important and is really what helps center us and be ready to handle the change that might happen, because life happens. Grant makers happen, calling with unexpected things, donors asking for things. It's part of what we do every day as nonprofit professionals. So I'm thrilled you've joined us for the conversation today. And what would I like to cover with you? I could talk about Agile and Agile related things all day. We don't have all day. We have less than an hour together today. And so I want to talk about Agile values first. I want to talk about why it is important to understand ways that we prioritize our work, whatever our work might be. We'll look at how we can handle and kind of process the changes that might come our way, prioritize the changes that might come our way. And we'll talk about making change visible, making our work visible, making the way that we respond to change visible. As Josh said, there's going to be some prompts, just like the one I gave you, where I ask you to respond in the chat if you are so willing. No pressure that you ever have to do that, but if you are willing, love your participation there. And that's why if you've got a question about the topic, I don't want to have it get lost in the chat box. I want to make sure we answer it. So using the Q&A portion of the Zoom webinar would be great so that we can answer them at the end. Josh.
Yes.
I have a question for you.
Okay. Let's see.
I know, pop quiz. No,
Right.
no pressure. I'm
Right.
wondering, because we were having some fun before talking about how like Kanban boards, maybe you've had some experience and some fun using them. I'm wondering though, there's no right or wrong answer, please no pressure. Have you ever seen the Agile values that are in the Agile manifesto before? Have you seen these values on the screen before today?
I'm going to be honest. This is the first time I'm seeing these, even though I think I've been doing something that's like Agile. So this is exciting. I'm excited to learn more about these values.
Cool. Okay. So when we think about these 4 values, these are like the cliff notes of the whole Agile manifesto. Agile manifesto is an international manifesto across industries, across countries, across languages. You can go read more about it should you be interested later on. Anybody can go to agilemanifesto.org and take a look. Please do not be scared by the software language that does exist in the manifesto. I just want to say that up front. What I want you to focus on, the most important part of the manifesto, I think, for our conversation today are the 4 values. If you say, we are an Agile team, like capital A Agile, we're not talking about whether we like to do yoga and stretch in the morning or not. We're talking about being Agile as a team. That means that we embrace these 4 values on the screen. And this manifesto was first written in 2001. So they've been around for a while, but back then it was really about software. The folks that wrote it were very much anchored in software, which is why you see that language there. But look at these 4 values. The items in bold and green on the left are considered to be more important. So we value them more or over the items in plain text in blue on the right. So we value the way that we, like who we work with and the way we interact with each other, we value that more if we're an Agile team than the processes and tools. Sure, it's important that we understand how we might use Slack or Google Drive or, tools like Bloomerang. We value those tools. but we value the interactions with our peers way more. Okay, so like that's an example of how that first one might play out.
Would that also apply to like donors, like
Mm.
constituents, or am I?
Oh, you are 100% right on point, Josh. Yeah,
Okay, good,
yeah,
okay,
that's exactly
cool.
it. We would value, so, okay, customer, like that's kind of a funny word for nonprofits for some of us, but customer, client, stakeholder, community member, patient, all the same. We value those interactions and collaboration over what we're trying to do together, what we're trying to achieve together. We value that over more than something that's negotiating a contract or an MOU or a terms of service. Still important, but that collaboration with our stakeholders, we value that more. Now, I'd like you to look at that fourth value. That one looks kind of like the title for today's session, doesn't it? It is responding to change over following a plan. So pre-pandemic, I would pull up these values and I would ask the nonprofit professionals either in the room or in the Zoom room, which of these do you think makes sense in your work? Do any of these feel like that they apply? And a lot of people would pick the first value, which I really love. I mean, I love all four of these values. Don't make me pick a favorite. But since the pandemic, since March 13th of 2020, when the school bus stopped stopping at my house, it's the fourth value that is the most common answer: responding to change over following a plan. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to dig in on this fourth value. That's really the point of today's conversation. There's more to being agile than only this value, but given that this is, quite frankly, it's always been a part of our work as nonprofit professionals, but we've upped the ante the last few years. That's what we're going to spend our time in. Now, when we think about who's in the room, there's some more values I'd like to introduce you to. And so there are 5 values within the Scrum framework, and they're listed here in the acrostic on the right-hand side. As a writer, I mean, as a grant professional, as a grant writer, I think word puzzles, word games, acrostics, it's just part of my love language. That and puns, fair warning, they may come out today. But look at these 5 values: openness, respect, courage, focus, commitment. I've heard about what you do for sustainable pace, for self-care for you. I'd like to hear which values we have represented in this Zoom room today. If you'd like to tell us, we'll see your name in the chat, but if you'd like to tell us your title so we could get a sense of the role you play in your nonprofit, so you could go title or role, but if you could tell us which of the 5 Scrum values resonates with you the most. You might say all of them, Diane. I don't know, the most. So just in this moment, which one really stands out to you? But it'd be really interesting to see which sort of roles and focus areas we have in the Zoom room, and which of these values resonates with you the most. There's no right or wrong answer here. And as always, with all of the prompts I give, completely optional. So let's see who we have in the room and what we've got going on with some of our values here. All right. Oh, we got a whole bunch there. Courage at one time. Josh, what do you want to say? Can I put you on the spot? Do you want to pick one?
Yes. So I actually would pick courage. So, and I think part of that is more about creativity and trying new things, right? I think oftentimes we get in a rut and we're doing the same thing. We're sending the same email campaign, or we're doing the same thing. And I think sometimes we, or at me personally, right, like it's hard to sort of find that courage to try something new. And I think that's how you iterate and that's how you grow. So yeah, courage.
Oh, fantastic. My answer depends on the day, always. Okay. Megan Martin, our training coordinator, will tell you that. Yeah, Diane's answer is always different. Today's answer is focus, because there is a lot happening. And if I let my brain pause for a moment and not think about what is the priority for the moment, it's like a shiny object. Whew, I'd be all over, and I'd be context switching, and it'd be terrible for my ultimate impact. So it's all about focus, being in the moment. Today is the value I am doubling down on. But I saw all 5 in the chat box multiple times. And that makes me so happy, because when we think about Agile teams, capital A, or if we drill down into any of the specific frameworks, so a team that uses the Scrum framework or a team that uses Kanban, a lot of these others are about programming, probably not your choice in nonprofits, but any of these, for them to be successful, it really means that we have cross-functional teams. And I don't mean only cross-functional in terms of the skills that you bring to the team, whether you like grants or writing annual appeals or talking about bequests, or if you're in programming and you're talking about like who likes to write logic models, who likes to do the evaluation after, who's the hands-on delivery of the programming. Nope. When we look at the 5 Scrum values that you've typed into the chat box today, that's actually an amazing first way to help your team identify that you're cross-functional and that there's these amazing skills and strengths that you bring to the team that are going to help you embrace the 4 Agile values, especially today's 4th value, that responding to change over following a plan. So why do I have an umbrella on the screen? I mean, it is raining pretty hard in the Thousand Islands today. We're having a warm front. It's about to be unseasonably warm. So if I was commuting, not on a Zoom room, I would have packed an umbrella. But the purpose of the umbrella today is to help you understand that Agile, those values in the manifesto, they are an umbrella over these other frameworks. So if you use Kanban in your organization, a way of showing to do, doing, and done, that's great. You're under the umbrella of Agile. If you use the Scrum framework, 3 roles, 5 events, 3 artifacts, cool. You're under the Agile umbrella. So today's conversation is not about which framework you use or which digital tool you may use, because, hold on, sidebar, little soapbox. Did you know that which digital tool you use, or if you use one at all, doesn't make you Agile? Doesn't matter if you use Trello or Asana or ClickUp or Jira or Monday, or I could keep going. There's so many. It doesn't matter which one you use. They don't make you Agile. They just help make your work visible to you and your team. Okay, I'll climb off the soapbox. But the important thing here is that these Agile values, the fact that they are attached to the highest level there, to that umbrella that all these frameworks fit under, that all these tools live under, the specific framework isn't what's important today. You could use a bit from here and a bit from there, and that'd be fine. Or just try one little thing from Scrum, or stick up a Kanban board for the first time. All great. So here at Agile and Nonprofits, we do say we are Agile agnostic, because they can all bring value to your team. And so what I want you to think about are the values that will help bring an Agile mindset to your team, rather than focusing on a specific framework or a specific tool. I said a lot of things. It's a pretty big assumption or a pretty big ask that I'm making of you. I'm asking for you not to worry about tools. I'm asking for you not to worry about a specific framework that you have to learn, but rather to say, I'm here because I want to help my team think about having an Agile mindset. Could everybody let me know how they feel about that in the chat box? Hands up, maybe a Y for yes. I'm on board, I'm good. Exclamation points optional. Or if you've got a question about what that means, what it means to say, I'm here to learn these values and an Agile mindset, and think about how we put them in place without the dressing of a specific framework. So, and here I've used some language and some words, Scrum, Kanban, and that, you're like, that's a lot of language. That's why I'm telling you, we're just going to focus on Agile values. That's the new vocabulary for everybody today. We don't have to worry about a framework. We could learn about those later if we want. I want you to think about how we're going to embrace the Agile value of responding to change over following a plan. And so to do that, we are going to use a conversation about prioritization. So when we think about prioritizing our work, I would like to know who feels like all of the priorities are the same level of importance. Everything is highest priority possible, get it done right now. How many of you feel that your work is basically all on one horizontal line? Everything is equally important. It all has the pressure of getting it done ASAP. That's all you see in email. That's all you hear in the meetings, ASAP. I don't mean this to, I'm not going to call anybody out. You don't have to tell me what organization you're with. Just a question about how it feels in your team, trying to get a sense of where folks are at. Okay, so some of you that resonates that way. For others, do you feel that you have a clear, numerically sequential order of prioritization for work? This is the most important thing, number one, that we will do. And then the second most important, and the third most important, and the fourth, and so on. Okay, I see for some that's starting to resonate. That's what they feel. They feel that they do have clear prioritization. How many of you feel like you're somewhere in the middle? Might depend on the day. Might depend on what's going on, maybe what season of the year you're in. Are you getting close to the big special event? Are you getting ready to drop the annual appeal to the mailer? Are you getting ready for a big federal grant? Oh, yeah. Okay. I see that, like for Jeanette, that resonates, right? It kind of depends on what's going on. No, Josh is like, please don't ask me this question live, right? I'm like, I saw your face. Like,
well, what's really funny is I think our team lead is actually listening in on this. So I'm going to be careful now. I'm careful how I answer this.
That's why I'm like, I'm not, no, optional. You don't have to answer.
Yeah, right. No. I guess what I would say is I think it is middle for me a little bit. I think sometimes it's a hair on fire kind of day where everything's a level, 100% has to get done. And then some of it, like there's clear priorities, right? And I think with the team that I'm part of, I try and help with the prioritization, because I think when it's when everything is 100%, you don't, it feels like everything stops, right? Because you don't know what to focus on.
Yeah.
We're really trying to level set and figure out what the true priorities are, and then how do we move them forward? Because you got to kind of chunk it out.
Yeah. Or like, so if Outlook is your email system and everything comes in with a red exclamation point, it loses its meaning, right?
Yeah.
Or if in Slack or GChat or Microsoft Teams or wherever you are, everything has a capital ASAP, it loses its meaning. Right? So if we think about why we want to prioritize our work, who would like to theorize? All comments welcome in the chat box. Why is it important in our nonprofit organizations? Why is it important for us to understand the priorities that our teams are working towards? Does anyone want to give us a thought on why it's important that we prioritize our work? Beyond maybe some personal stress level. I mean, that's important. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, that is important. That is important.
Yeah. But what do nonprofits have in common?
Yeah.
They all have a mission statement. There is a specific, oh yes, I see it coming in. And yes, donors too. So we all are working towards a mission. We're working towards a vision. There's impact that we are trying to create with those hard-earned donor dollars, with our hard-earned grantmaker awards. And so when we think about how we want to create this change in our community, in our region, for our target population, if all things are equal, how are we going to get any one thing quickly to completion? Or how might we risk not putting our best effort on the most important thing, not to us, but to the community that we work with and serve? These are the risks that could happen with our organization. So when we think about prioritizing work, remember, I told you my first love is grants. And so while I understand that all of you on the line may not love grants the way I do, you may not want to call yourself a grant professional. You are likely in an organization or have peers who are doing the grant work to help your organization. And so I'm asking that we're going to use that as our fundraising mechanism for the prioritization conversation. This is not a ploy on my part to make anyone love grants. Okay, just to be clear, you don't have to come be a member of GPA. Always welcome, but no requirement. So if we think about a 12-month period of time for an organization, and let's say that this nonprofit wants to have a diversified funding stream for grant revenue that includes foundations and state and federal dollars. So if we think about prioritizing our work, what is our go-to? Well, usually I'd say it's when is it due and where does it sit on the calendar? You might also take the same idea and think about how many mailings are you planning to do, or how many email campaigns are you planning to do, and where do those fit in relation to if you've got special events. So you might have a calendar instead of being only grants. Maybe it's a calendar of all your fundraising activities that it takes to implement your fundraising plan. Okay, but we lay out our fiscal year and we look at this and we say, all right, so how does this work in terms of sustainable pace? Like, can we get all these things done? That might be one gut check that we use. We might also use our gut check of how much revenue each of these things will generate, and if that will help us meet our budgeted target. So if we wrote all of these grants represented by little sticky notes on the screen, we probably won't get them all. Most people don't. So if we wrote these and we had about our average success percentage, would we meet our revenue target? And that might be the gut check that we use to confirm this calendar is what makes sense. But I've got a question for everyone. Is there anything about the layout on this calendar, looking at these 12 months, does anyone have a concern with it? And I get it, you can't read all the tiny text, it's okay. From what you can see, does anyone have a concern about any of these months?
Dan, I feel like you're not going to have the holidays. I'm just going to toss that out there.
I like Jody's framing. December's a wee bit busy. Wee bit.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Okay.
Kim says it looks horrid. Right.
Yeah.
So you might look at this and say, well, we can meet our revenue goal, and the rest of the year looks okay-ish. But oh my gosh, December. So what could we shift? Well, the light blue here are representing reports, and reports usually mean you have to complete the work in order to report. So maybe we have to negotiate and reprioritize some of the other things. Maybe the deadlines, like applications that we thought we would submit in December, could we get them ready early? Could we prioritize doing them in November, or maybe even starting them in October so that we were ready early? But laying the work out visually is what provides us the opportunity to do more than be in the moment, getting to be like mid-November and looking ahead at our personal calendar in December and going, oh, it looks horrid. How are we going to do it? So we could move things around by calendar date and just try to do some pre-work. I say just, air quotes. But what if instead of talking about our layout of work based on the deadline, based on what we expect to raise towards our budget goal, what if instead we laid them out by our resource priorities? Let me show you what that looks like. But before I do, so I've called out that the yellow are reports. The red we've got representing government grants, just to represent that they're a little bit bigger. Yellow are all the foundation grants. But if we flip instead and take exactly the same items of work, no different. So we already acknowledged these could meet our revenue targets. These could be negotiated a little bit so that we work at a sustainable pace and don't have to do heroic things in December. And instead took them and put them against like our strategic plan priorities or the resource priorities that we've heard for the organization. We need money for new computers. We need money for our after school program. We need money for transportation for seniors to get to their medical appointments, whatever our priorities are in our organization. What if we laid out those same deadlines across the priorities? Does anyone have a question or a concern? We've got priority number 1 on the left-hand side, all the way through 12 priorities that have been articulated, spots where we want to try and raise funds. Does this feel balanced, or do you have any concerns about what you see? Again, reading the text on it is absolutely not important. It's just noting that it's something, it's due. What do you think, Josh? What stands out?
I mean, you got a lot going on with priority 2. So is that really a priority, I guess, would be my question. I think that's, you're getting some of that in the chat. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it looks like priority 11 and 12, Casey called this out, which is there's nothing for them.
Right.
Really on it too. So maybe they're not, was that an error, or do we just don't have grants for those priorities?
Right. And those are the types of questions that come up. So if we think about what is our plan, we managed to negotiate the calendar, we managed to make sure that our ideas of our funders were, we thought, going to generate revenue, but are they in the spots where the organization needs the money? So if I were looking at this as maybe a vice president of development, or I'm the executive director, I mean, I'm appointing myself to all the things. Now I'm the chair of the board. And I look at this, I'm like, dear team, why are we only doing 2 things for what we've already all agreed is our number 1 priority where we need resources? I mean, really cool. Good job finding a lot of stuff for 2. But why are there only 2 things for priority 1? If I'm in charge, like I said, I'm wearing the board chair hat now. I'm like, well, okay, so we didn't find any grants that were going to fit in our calendar of capacity that were there for 11 and 12. That's okay, right? Like that's low end priority. So we don't have to have something in all the priorities, but should it be weighted so that the priorities the organization agreed on had more of our time, more of our effort, more of the grant applications? I would argue that we probably want to, so that we don't end up with some of our most important programs and services underfunded, right? If leadership has given us priorities, it's one thing to calendar them so they fit, like on that grant calendar we saw on the last slide, but maybe we want to, I don't know, I'll pick on priority 7 and 8. Maybe we want to look at those funders and think about if we want to apply to them. They're a good fit. We think we've got a good relationship there. I wonder if they'd actually be interested in priority number 1. Or if they're really like, that's where they belong, especially knowing that red represents a government grant and government grants take more effort. Geez, maybe we should try to find a different government opportunity for priority 1 and not do priority 8 this year. Maybe we should set that one aside. Or maybe we recognize that we need more capacity. If we're going to do that, we can't do it with the resources we have. Moving these items around and shifting them so that one is calendar and one is priority gives us like a checks and balances for different purposes. But by understanding our plan compared to the priority of the organization as a whole, with that impact, that ultimate mission in mind, it forces a different conversation, and it helps us to understand. Now, if something new came in, oh, wait a second, I'm assuming that nonprofits get grant opportunities that they weren't expecting and that they have to sometimes make a choice about whether to apply or not. Am I making a funny assumption? Does that happen to anyone else? Your organization all of a sudden is like, oh, there's a grant that's due in 17 days. It's brand new. Should we do it? Show of hands in the chat box. Has that ever happened to you? Or a well-intentioned grant maker phones and says, we'd love to put you on the docket. Or could you have something to me in 48 hours? Anybody ever have that one? Yeah. Okay, so that has happened to folks. So if we were to look at it from a calendar perspective, our calendars are always already full. Let's acknowledge that. We don't ideally want to do something heroic, because that's what causes burnout in the sector. We don't want to work lots at night or work weekends, work over vacations. We want to avoid it if we can. But what if when the interruptions come in, instead of looking at our calendar, which we know is already full, what if we looked at our prioritization sort out instead? If that last minute request came in and it was for priority 11, go for it or not? What do you think, Josh? What would your choice be?
I'm gonna have to say that one, we pass. We say thank you, but we doesn't fit right now, I think.
Okay.
Is that right? No, maybe. Is there no right, isn't it?
There's no right or wrong answer. We just want to prevent burnout in the sector. That's our ultimate goal, and create impact with our organization. Okay. Now you look at it and you're like, oh, this is a new opportunity we weren't expecting, that was not on the calendar. It's for priority 1.
Oh,
What do you do now? Is it a yes or a no?
yeah. I mean, if that's the number one priority of our organization, I'm going to look at that boat share and say we probably need to sort of move things around here, to adapt to change a little bit.
Right. So it doesn't look like this in software tools. It doesn't look like this usually on your personal calendar. This takes a little bit of a unique visual approach to try and have flexibility to say, I get what the calendar is, but how does it sort against priorities? So this is something that you could do literally on the wall in your cube or in your office, maybe at the beginning of the fiscal year as you're planning, and then be able to react to it ongoing. This is mocked up in a tool called Miro, Miro. It's a virtual whiteboard is all it is, right? There's another one, Mural, Mural. That one actually gives free licenses to nonprofits if you apply. Post-it even has an app, but ways you can create something quick that's able to be moved around and that's really flexible. So what I'd like to hear from you about in the chat box, should you be willing, is tell us a little bit about how your team is prioritizing your work. Is your team prioritizing your work? If you wanted to think about what you would do if something like a last minute application came up, how would you talk about prioritization? How would you talk about ways that it might change? Do it all. Yeah, Lisa, that is a very common response, right? And thank you. Megan from our team is putting the links to those 2 tools I just called out verbally. She's put those in the chat for you. So Josh, do you want to share? How does your team prioritize work? How's that visible to folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, at the end of the day, we look at our company goals for the year, and it's then sort of trying to figure out how, and there is they definitely are prioritized, and it's how do we, is what we're doing working towards those goals, or is what we're doing, is a lower priority. So an example is, if we have, one of our priorities is using data better, right? I think, there's so much data that comes in, and it's how can we use that data to help improve our products for our customers. And so when there's something that comes in that where we're able to sort of better understand data, we prioritize that against maybe something that would be nice to have, but not necessarily a project we need to move forward.
Yeah. And I see some folks in the chat box talking about how they're looking for a way to get a prioritized strategy, right? That's part of what they're hoping to learn. So there are 7 different methods. Like when I teach a class to product owners, so the people in a Scrum Agile team that are doing the prioritization, there are 7 different ways that people could approach prioritizing. Lots of options. We don't need to probably in this situation talk very much about net present value. We're not going to go back to economics class and worry about that one. It is an option, but maybe not as appropriate in all of our nonprofit settings. But if we think about how we might be measuring the impact that results from our actions, so not business value, but mission value, that's something that we could start to prioritize around. So that's probably one of the most common that we see nonprofit teams that are agile. That's one of the most common ways we see them prioritizing their work. And Actually, maybe we'll make that 8 based on Casey's comment in the chat box. Is the juice worth the squeeze? We're going to make that an honorary 8th. I think that,
Yeah.
or it just sums up all 7. Maybe that's it too. That's fantastic. And I appreciate that your team approaches it that way and that you shared. That's fantastic. So why is it important that we have an approach to prioritization for our work? It's because even as an eternal optimist like me gets up every day and thinks about how I'm going to get from point A to point B, something goes differently than planned. Today, it happened to be spilling the coffee all over the kitchen. Squiggly line on the way from point A to point B. Yesterday, it was that we were locked out of an important portal. And we're like, why won't this let us in? And it like kept resetting. Squiggly line. Things happen, right? Whether it's that a donor has called or the grant maker has called, or it's the portal, or it happens to be the sad cup of coffee. So how do we respond to the change? So I'd like you to think about your upcoming workload, the things that your team is focused on. That's represented by the things in this scroll. Different bodies of work. So it doesn't matter what type of work you do, but your team has a whole bunch of stuff coming up over the next, we'll say, quarter. And so we get a little closer to doing the work. And so we might start to talk to the team about doing a smaller bit of work. Like, here's what we're going to do over the next month. So we know all the things coming up in our fundraising plan for the next quarter. We actually know for the rest of the year, but here's what we're focusing on for the rest of May and maybe early June. And so we might commit to that as a team and say, okay, we've got 1 state application and 1 federal grant that's going to go in and 3 foundations. And so we commit and we're like, yep, everybody's on board. We're going to get started with that. But maybe your team has something called the buffer that it also commits to. Here's why this idea is important. Because we know that change happens, because we know that we get interrupted by well-intentioned colleagues and community members. Oops, one too far, sorry. We need to have a way that we handle the interruption, or otherwise the comments I saw in the chat box about hearing from management or from leadership that we're just going to do it all will cause something negative to happen, whether it's staff burnout, or whether it's having to do something heroic, those extra hours. Actually, that's what leads to the burnout. Or whether it's maybe we wish we could have spent more time on that one particular narrative. We're a little nervous about its competitiveness, but we had to do it all, right? Things happen. Or maybe we make a choice and spend some more money to get something done on a rush job. But as we think about the interruptions that we're hearing or the changes that are happening around us, is there someone on behalf of your team that can say, I hear you, thank you so much for the phone call. However, that actually is like not our number 1 priority for our grant applications right now. And we're going to save that one for later. We'll apply next year. We'll calendar it. We'll know it's there later. Or someone that can say, oh, dear board member, thank you so much for the suggestion that we add a chocolate fountain to our special event that's in 3 weeks. I'm channeling Mark Pittman to talk about chocolate fountains. Whether you love them or not, in terms of chocolate fountains at events, I'm like, but can you imagine me like, you want me to do what? We're almost there. Thank you so much for that suggestion. We're going to include that in next year's planning committee discussions. They're already all booked, too late, right? Or do you say, dear grant maker, thank you so much for your consideration of a $25,000 grant for us this year. In addition to the one you already gave us, absolutely. We'll have that 2-page summary to you in 4 days. We'll do it now. So what one person can do for the team is negotiate the changes, the interruptions, and help the team understand the prioritization. So maybe it's your vice president of development, maybe it's your development director, maybe it's your grants and foundations manager, and there's others supporting the work. Maybe it's your vice president of programs. But having one person in the team that can hear all the interruptions and changes and help the team understand super important now. We're going to use the saved capacity of the team to do it. Or we're going to set it aside for a little bit later or for next year. What that person, whatever their title might be, what that person is doing. Here's my favorite thing from the pandemic. I mean, I have always loved the Friends series, can't help it. Love it. And this scene from the episode where Ross is trying to get a couch up into his apartment that clearly is not going to fit around the stairwell. Yeah, whether it's the GIF version or like the just, standard meme. Yeah, everywhere in 2020, 2021, and even into 22, right? How does your team pivot? Having one person for the team who understands that their role is to help the team react to that change and talk about prioritization now or later is critical. Otherwise, one, it's a lot of pressure on each of our shoulders. And two, who really wins? Like, who gets to decide that? So we want to have one person in the team who's going to help us think about what that pivot is, now or later. Let's come back to our fourth value, shall we? I would like to give you a moment to humble brag. Your choice on if you put the hashtag in front of the idea or not. I would love to hear, again, optional for you to share in the chat box, one example, because I'm guessing you're going to have many. What's an example of how your team or your organization as a whole changed, pivoted, did something different since the pandemic started? I have no idea what it will be. I'm always intrigued by the answers. Josh, does anything come to mind for you?
I mean, we really became a virtual first employer. I mean, and I think it was not, I mean, we could have kept hiring in Indiana, which is where we're based, and we had some remote folks, but we really just fully embraced that to find the best talent, wherever they may be in the country, and provided the tools to for the team to be able to do that. I think that was kind of an interesting shift there, for sure.
For sure.
What do we got going on in the chat here? Switch to digital marketing from April there. That's definitely a big change there.
Yeah, lots of folks talking about changing from in-person to virtual events. I love it. I actually went to more special events the last 2 years than I ever have, because our clients are around the country, and all of a sudden I didn't have to get on a plane in order to go to like the Riverside Senior Center. I didn't have to drive all the way to New York City to go to their annual event, and I was at more places than ever. I was like, if we could just keep a little bit of it. I love in-person stuff. I thought it was more fun. I went to more great stuff, more technology. Okay, wonderful. Break the tradition on some of your restricted giving. Oh, Kim, that's great. It's always fascinating to hear what people come up with as examples. There's so many. When you think about the change that you just shared in the chat box, please, it's a lot to type into the chat box. So this is more of like food for thought. How did that change come about? How was it communicated? This might help you identify who is the person for your team that's going to help to handle as changes come in. Smaller changes, we'll say, than a pandemic. Small little changes, grant maker changes, donor changes. As change comes about, who is it that helps the team understand where we might reprioritize things? How would we communicate that to the rest of the team? There's not, unfortunately, one right answer for how you're going to think about this or how you would approach it. But the person's title for the team, also not a right answer, but someone that is consistently about prioritization. And maybe it's you. Maybe you're like, oh my God, Diane's talking about me. I am that person for my team. Awesome. Congratulations. That's fantastic. When you think about the changes that are happening and how your team reacts to them, how you maybe set something down for later, or you say it's a huge priority, we're going to do it now. Both this conversation and the previous about the grant calendar and looking at it like calendar style versus priority order and looking at that layout, there's two things, or one thing that these two things have in common. how the idea of making our work visible makes these things more attainable, easily more accessible to the team. If they're hidden in our calendars, or if they're hidden in a Google Doc, or if they're hidden in a tool, it's harder for the team to come together and stand in front of or sit in the Zoom room together and talk about the change. So if we think about what happens when change is occurring, it can be uncomfortable, right? We're reacting to change, we're reacting to things we didn't expect, and it can be uncomfortable. And so therefore, not everything always goes perfectly as planned. Well, I hope you don't feel like I'm putting that on you. I mean, maybe things go perfectly as planned for you all the time, in which case, please reach out, let's chat. But when we are reacting to change, handling something that we didn't expect, sometimes as a team, we'll get it right and it'll be amazing. And we're like, how do we keep doing that? Other times we'll be like, oh, I had to stay an hour late. And then that meant that I started dinner late, and it meant I walked the dog late. And I don't want to have to do that again. So when we're thinking about how our teams communicate and what's visible about how we react to change, something that I would ask you to consider as a way that your team processes continuous improvement related to responding to change. It's an event called the Retrospective, and it's designed to help a team think about how they work together, not what you create, but how you work together. So this isn't like a postmortem after events or after we've submitted a big grant, but rather thinking about big picture, how are we working together, and asking ourselves what went well, what could have gone better, what might we try to improve? And so asking ourselves that as a whole team and sitting down to say, okay, over the last week or over the last 2 weeks, whatever the block of time is that we continuously want to talk about, what went well? We could say, oof, yeah, that didn't go well for how we had to get it done. The grant maker said they needed it, but quite frankly, I ended up working till 6 and then this and this and that. So that didn't go as well as I had hoped. But maybe we could have a hypothesis as a team. How could we improve that next time? What would be a way if that happens again, because it's likely to happen again, how could we improve the way we work together to make it better? So the team could come up with one hypothesis to try and see if it works. Because we don't want to just let change happen to us and then move on to the next thing. We want to think about, as we're working together as a team, change is constantly happening. How can we use that in our experiences to continuously improve the way we work together? So what's on the screen, see how that looks kind of like a starfish? It's called the Starfish Retrospective. There's lots of other fun ways that you can facilitate retrospectives and have teams process that idea of what went well or what didn't go well, what could we do better related to change, or just even day-to-day activities. There's some in our free toolkit here. You can grab the QR code if you want. Some of them are ones like about a sailboat. We've done an ice cream one. We've got a colleague over in the UK. His name's Chris Stone, the Agile coach. He makes retro prompts that are about Taco Tuesday. Just saying, I'm like, I love it. Star Wars, The Simpsons. Like, this doesn't have to be a very solemn, somber event. It can be a lot of fun. So I encourage you to think about that. And to return to our 5 Agile values. When we think about the openness, respect, courage, focus, and commitment that we were looking at earlier, you shared a lot of different values for each of you. And these 5 values need to be present in the team for the retrospective to really be as a powerful tool as we'd hope. But starting the conversation is exactly just that. It's a start. It's something to build on, to think about how might we try different things for how we respond to change. So I want to highlight one other tool that you can have as a download then as a result. You might, in the retrospective, you might decide we want to try to do something differently, which means really you're identifying like the future target condition that your team wants to operate like. We would like to prioritize differently, or we'd like to handle last minute grant maker requests differently. And so then you could document, well, what's it like now? That's your actual condition. What might be an obstacle to you reaching your target condition? And then you could think about some, like, are there actionable next steps to reach that target condition? This is a process called the Toyota Kata. So it comes from the Toyota production system, like making the cars. But the idea that we would identify something we want to do, something we want to look like as a team, it might not be rapid fire that we could achieve it, but we could think about steps to take that we could work towards together. So the Toyota Kata, this is like above and beyond that retrospective idea. It is a great way that you can facilitate conversations about change and how we achieve change together. So this isn't not only responding to change, but how can we achieve change together then? And I see in the chat box, when we talk about Kaizen, that's something that comes out of the retrospective. That's the one change for the good that we're focused on in Scrum. And so these are tools that have been used in Agile teams in all sorts of industries, but our facilitation tools really is what they are. They don't have to be only in one industry. They're super powerful in any team setting, including actually like in your own world. I have a Toyota Kata board about how to be ready to run a half marathon again after an injury. Current condition, injured. Future condition, half marathon again, right? It works. But when we think about this conversation, I'm sorry, I could go all day, but I'm wondering, do we have any questions that we should try and tackle quickly, Josh? I got all excited.
You did get excited. I was like, I love that you have QR codes. I'm like, I was multitasking. Sorry, let me do my real job here, which is looking, it looks like we don't have any questions at the moment. So I think, let's see if anyone wants to ask a question. Diane, can you go a couple minutes over, or do you have a hard stop?
I can go over, absolutely, because I got all excited. But we've had so much great interaction in the chat box, and people were asking some things there, so maybe that's part of it too. But I'm happy to answer questions after the fact too. We are always, I'm happy to be on social media and answer LinkedIn message, whatever. I get that not everybody wants to email a question and have more in their inbox. But we've got a office hours where we answer questions, and actually other people will answer questions too. It's not just like Diane answering questions. So
we got a couple questions. I'm going to actually launch a poll here that's going to make it, I think, easier for everyone. It's just a question asking if you'd like Diane or a member of her team to follow up, or if you'd like someone from Bloomerang, if you have any questions about Bloomerang. So I'm going to launch that. We'll let that roll here for a second. So feel free to respond to that poll as we wrap up. And we did have a couple questions come in here, Diane. So the first one is from April, and April asks, how does this apply in a two-person team? It sounds like it's April and myself, the executive director, and a trainee. Okay, maybe that's three.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Absolutely, because as a small team, you have limited resources. And so prioritization is absolutely paramount to your success of working at a sustainable pace and yet still achieving impact. And so the good news is actually in a small team, there's fewer people to make sure they understand how you might shift in the moment to address priorities when change happens. So I'd say in some ways that it's a positive thing when you're a smaller team like that. You have the ability to be more, nimble and communicate quickly without ensuring everyone sees all the things. So I would say today's conversation is just as relevant, if not more so, so that you don't become overwhelmed. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it more, April. If you want to reach out, we can certainly talk offline.
Perfect. And then we have one more here from Lisa, and Lisa is asking, is there a number of priorities recommended based on the size of a team or agency? I actually had that same question when we saw the 11 priorities. Is there a magic number that you like? Is there a ratio, or like what's the
No, that I wish there was like a secret sauce. But this is because when I'm looking at the priorities that were there on that screen, like for 12, that's like fundraising priorities over a year or over like a whole capital campaign. Or if we're thinking about like No, we'll just stick with those. I won't go like any further into the weeds. Those are over a big period of time. And so are you going to work on all 12 priorities each and every day? Oh, I hope not. That's a lot of context switching. Are you focusing on maybe 2 priorities at a time because you've got an application in priority 1 open and one in priority 3 open? Is that what you're focused on for a period of 2 weeks as a team? Yeah. Okay, that might make more sense. So in the short term, you should be focusing on like one thing at a time and then moving to the next priority. But like calendar, there's probably a few things happening at the same time, but you want the team to understand if we're working on something, what is the most important thing, even knowing that over the course of the year, we're doing all 12 priorities, or we're doing all 7 priorities. In the moment, try to focus your actionable work on one thing. And then you might say, well, I finished that for the day. Now I can go work on priority number 2 for what we have going on this week. And then for priority 3 for what we have going on this week. But try to actually think about your workflow in that way too. But now there's no magic answer for what's perfect for a team.
Well, Diane, we really, really appreciate you for joining us today. I know I learned a lot, and hopefully all of our attendees, learned as well. Again, we will be mailing out or emailing. We're not going to mail them. We're going to email out a link to view this recording if you want to go back, as well as the slides. Our webinar for next week is starting from zero, how to raise money for your new nonprofit. And I think there's going to be some takeaways from existing nonprofits as well. And that is going to be led by the one and only Tiffany Allen. So that is next week, 2 p.m. Eastern. And so with that, Diane, thank you. Any final thoughts here before we sign off?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was fun I just appreciate your willingness to share some of your thoughts as we went along. Appreciate that live perspective. Thanks, everyone.
All right. You all have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. And we will talk to you soon. Take care, y'all.